Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show live on Rumble, where facts come first and where news is done right. And we begin with big breaking news over in Europe, where President Trump is making it clear that he's putting the pressure on Putin, demanding a peace deal in 50 days or 100% tariffs, can't make it up, on any country importing business from Russia. Watch.
With NATO be viewed as a step towards achieving peace, letting Putin know that now Zelensky has a little bit more powerful tools in his tool chest, and maybe that brings him to the table to achieve peace. So I know that you wanted to do that.
Brian, that's what we've been saying. I think you might have expressed it better if you wanted to. That's exactly what.
That's a summary.
That was a nice summary. I think he's done better than us. He's a very good guy. I can tell you that. But no, it's well said. Yeah, I think this is a chance at getting peace. Or it's just going to be the same thing. I have to tell you, Europe has a lot of spirit for this war. A lot of people, when I first got involved, I really didn't think they did, but they do. And I saw that a month ago, and you were there, most of you, many of you were there. The level of esprit de corps, spirit that they have is amazing. They really think it's a very, very important.
And meanwhile, we're continuing to learn more and more about Biden's auto pen scandal, where we're discovering that Biden's chief of staff is the one who gave auto pen approval for a wave of pardons during Biden's final years in office. Because according to the New York Times, Biden did not personally approve each name included in the broad categorical pardons, raising even more questions on whether the pardons are even valid. Think about the legal impact. Here's President Trump reacting earlier today. Take a look.
And I think it's maybe one of the biggest scandals that we've had in 50 to 100 years. This is a tremendous scandal. And I know the people on the other side of the, see that desk, that Resolute desk? Unfortunately, he used it before me. But, we have our choice of 7 desks. They're all beautiful, but I chose the Resolute, and so did he, unfortunately. But the people on the other side of the Resolute desk, I know them. Lisa, the whole group, and they're no good. They're sick people. And I guarantee you he knew nothing about what he was signing. I guarantee it.
Here to react to this and much more, senior editor at the Daily Signal, author of Octopus, Tyler O'Neill, back by popular demand. So wonderful to see you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks again so much for having me.
Absolutely. So lots to talk about. First of all, I want to get your reaction, okay, to some of the developments in America's footprint abroad. The president had some sharp words today for Putin, and Secretary Rubio continues to make major changes with the reorg at the State Department. What does it signal to you?
I think this signals that America is back and muscular, stronger than it has been in a long time. I mean, what we see at the State Department is a full retooling, a moving away from the woke weaponization we saw under USAID and toward an America First policy. And by the way, I think a lot of people are confused about what America First means. America First does not mean that the United States doesn't have any role in the world. America First doesn't mean, for instance, that we're going to allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, or that we're entirely going to sit back as Putin goes in war in Ukraine. I think what America First means is we're looking very closely at how America should get involved. When we get involved in Iran, we come in with the bombs, we drop them, we end the nuclear program, and then we get out of there. And we work hard to make a peace deal with the people who are still around. In Ukraine as well, President Trump came in saying, look, I want to make a deal with President Putin. I want to find a way that we can end this war. And when Putin shows that he's not willing to negotiate, Trump goes back to the table. He looks at how things are going. He's impressed by Russia showing, or by Europe showing spunk here and actually fighting Putin. And so now he's showing, as he always said, he's aimed at America First and peace. And what that means depends on what other people are doing around the world.
Well, and I know tomorrow, by the way, this is a big development. You are actually testifying in front of Congress on taxpayers funding left wing causes and groups. Can you preview those remarks and what message you hope to get across?
Yes. Well, I think it's very important for the American people to know, many of us have heard about USAID and are rightly shocked. And of course, I mentioned in my remarks about how USAID sent $27 million dollars or agreed to send $27 million dollars in grants to a left-wing nonprofit called the Tides Foundation, which cloaks which donors give to which projects. That's what makes it a dark money outfit. They funded the Southern Poverty Law Center, among many others, and they have an in-house group called Palestine Legal that represents these anti-Israel rioters on college campuses. But in addition to that direct funding, we also have the government sending money indirectly to the left's dark money network. One of the ways they do this is actually through the union dues of people who are in unions, who are federal employees in what are called public sector unions, which, by the way, even Franklin Delano Roosevelt, no fan of limited government, the guy who came up with the modern administrative state in his New Deal programs, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said public sector unions shouldn't exist. And they only exist because later Democratic presidents said that they were a good idea. I think we should revisit that. But anyway, these public sector unions get money from the taxpayer through the dues, the union dues that these federal employees give to the unions. And then they take that money and they give it to the same activist groups I cover in my book, The Woktopus, where I talk about this vast left-wing campaign to influence the bureaucracy, to use the bureaucracy to force the left's agenda on the American people. And this process, not only do they take part of the union dues, which again, in the case of bureaucrats, federal bureaucrats, those are your tax dollars that are then given as dues to these unions in the name of the unions representing the employees to get better deals. But really, they're diverted to these woke activist groups. And then finally, you get one more way that the left's dark money network benefits, and that's through taxpayer-funded union time, where you can actually, if you're a federal bureaucrat, you can do work for the union as opposed to the job that you were hired to do for the taxpayer, and still get taxpayer funding for the work you do for the union. And this is a very big scandal, I think, that doesn't get as much attention as it should. But, tomorrow I'll be talking more in depth about all these different ways that you unwittingly fund the very activist groups that push the Biden administration to be so extreme and that continually push things that are unpopular with the American people.
Like you've said, we see these so-called nonprofits, right, who have millions stored offshore. What more do you think we can do, from an oversight perspective?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. So one of the things I think it's very important to say, these nonprofits and the American people who want to fund them with their own money, they have every right to exist. And I support having laws that are applied evenly across the board. So I don't think that we should be using, taxpayer funded the 990, IRS status, nonprofit status to go after people. All that said, I think it's very important that we take a look here and see all these woke activist groups. Like, I think every organization that pursues things on behalf of the American people should be able to do so. But when you're looking at these radical groups, they're taking government money. That's a big problem. Like, I was a graduate of Hillsdale College, which very proudly says we do not take federal funding. And I think they're setting an example that Harvard really should pay attention to. But many conservative nonprofits also don't take federal funding. It's usually only the leftist ones who are aligned with the networks of big billionaire donors like George Soros that often receive a lot of this money from the taxpayer. And I think it's very important for Congress to take a close look and see, like, well, do we need a law that says if you're, pushing for specific changes in the government, you should not be receiving funds from the government? That seems like a very eminently plausible and very rational policy to take, in my opinion.
I've got to ask you about this other situation. You can't make this stuff up. About the auto pen scandal, right? And Joe Biden. So the chief of staff was reportedly, allegedly directing auto pen approval. Was Biden even aware, do you think, of what's going on? He's like, oh, I did all the pardons. I did this. I did that. I'm worried about that.
I'm skeptical as well. I think, we all saw how little with it Biden was in that debate with President Trump. I mean, even the left was like, "Oh no, we can't keep up this charade any longer." And that set off a huge red flag. And I think if, all these people who are saying that, oh, this was a big scandal, they tried to cover it up, now we have these books coming out. I'm like, why did it take so long for them to acknowledge that this was a cover up, that this was a scandal? And now, only now that we know President Biden has prostate cancer, which usually doesn't develop overnight, only now are we aware that he had this health problem. What about all the other health problems that he could have had? And I think it's very important for us to be asking, why didn't Kamala Harris invoke the 25th Amendment? Why didn't we have a legal look at these things and say, like, if they knew that there was a problem with Biden, if there was a big enough problem with Biden for him to step down from running for president, why was he still president through that last segment of his presidency? And, I don't have any evidence that he didn't know all of the things that they were signing with the auto pen. He claims that he did. The very fact, though, I think this is very important for us to realize. The very fact he has to claim, I knew, but then admits that the auto pen signed everything, I think that is itself a red flag. And we can't forget that his doctor was unwilling to say, he pled the Fifth Amendment, trying not to incriminate himself. When he was asked point blank, were you told to lie about the president's health? He refused to answer that question.
Unbelievable. Yeah, you guys are really on top of everything. I just want to know what else you think because in the best way possible to alert our viewers and listeners, what else should we be on top of that you guys are keeping an eye on over at the Daily Signal?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been following a lot and actually trying to tone a little bit back is my coverage of the Southern Poverty Law Center, just because it is so shocking, many of the things that we've been seeing. So their Form 990 just came out, and that confirmed yet again that we have this very wealthy nonprofit that has poverty in its name, and it has upwards of $30 million in offshore accounts and interests in the Cayman Islands. Now, that should be a huge red flag. Of course, what also happened was the president and CEO of the SPLC just resigned, this coming amid a big lawsuit that is headed toward trial. I mean, right now, the judge is deciding whether this lawsuit is going to go to trial or whether he's going to rule in favor of the SPLC or in favor of the Dustin Inman Society, which is a immigration group that the SPLC branded an anti-immigrant hate group. And the big thing there was the SPLC claimed that this is a group that masquerades as wanting to enforce immigration law, but really focuses on vilifying all immigrants. That would be news to them because they have legal immigrants on their board. So again, like, you can't make up many of these stories that are dogging the Southern Poverty Law Center. Meanwhile, the CEO was just fired about a year after the SPLC union demanded that she resign. She resigned. She didn't get fired. But the SPLC union was demanding that she resign about a year ago, saying that the SPLC's recent reorganization was all about union busting, these many layoffs. And all this comes right after the SPLC's hate map for the year, which for the first time put Turning Point USA, the largest conservative youth grassroots organization in the country, on the hate map with Klan chapters. They put PragerU, which is known for its 5-minute YouTube videos, on the hate map. And then they put Focus on the Family on the hate map. And this is big because for years, the SPLC said, when critics said the SPLC was anti-Christian, which, by the way, they've put conservative Christian groups on the hate map for years, the SPLC said, no, we're not anti-Christian. You know how you can know that we're not anti-Christian? We don't put Focus on the Family on the hate map. And then suddenly, this year, they removed the language from their website saying that they don't put Focus on the hate map. And that's the only way you can know that they're not anti-Christian. And suddenly add Focus on the Family to the hate map. So by its own admission, effectively, the SPLC has proved that it is an anti-Christian group.
Unbelievable. I love the way you follow all the facts. And, you've got like an Excel spreadsheet, I think, just laying it all out. We love you, Tyler O'Neill, and he is the amazing author of Woke to Buzz. Thank you so much. Great work you guys do over at the Daily Signal. Thank you so much.
Thanks again so much for having me, Kim.
And coming up, full coverage of the president's border security success. And in the meantime, be sure to check out the good folks over at 1775 Coffee Company. We talk about it all the time. Don't compromise on taste, quality, or your values. And 1775 Coffee is brewed to perfection. It is crafted with precision, and it is built on patriotism. The farm-to-cup process means there is quality, authenticity, and sustainability from start to finish. All the beans are ethically and exclusively single-sourced. So why not? Try 1775 coffee today. Yum. Go to 1775coffee.com/KG for 15% off your first order. And under President Trump, illegal border crossings are at a record low. Deportations are up, and violent criminals are off our streets. Watch.
Border Patrol in Metro Detroit arresting a man with a violent past in this country illegally.
So he admits to being a member of the notorious MS-13 gang, and Fox 2's Scott Wolchek says that his rap sheet includes murder.
What started out as two men arguing at a motel turned into an arrest, with one of the men admitting he was an MS-13 gang member.
Pretty wild. I've never heard of anything about any gang activity here or nothing.
But according to U.S. Border Patrol and Customs, the two men arrested at the Sterling Heights Super 8 were not in the country legally and were found to have more than 5 grams of crystal meth on them.
The drug problem around the area is just crazy and it's getting too much out of hand now.
This photo shows the MS-13 tattoo of one of the men, and border agents say he admitted to serving 20 years in a Salvadorian prison for the murder of a rival gang member.
It's just one of many examples, unfortunately, but Democrats, they want to demonize ICE instead of standing up for law and order. Here's acting ICE Director Todd Lyons on the dangers of demonizing ICE. Watch.
That was a criminal operation. That was a federal criminal search warrant and federal arrest warrant that we executed. So, Bill, we hear all the time that, ICE is out there. They don't have any warrants. They're just kidnapping people on the street. Well, we did exactly what elected officials on the left and the right have both said. If we had a criminal search warrant, if we had something signed by a judge, they would support us. And obviously they're not. We went ahead and did a dual law enforcement mission where we were looking at someone that was an organization based in America that was focused on human trafficking, forced labor, and potential child welfare trafficking. And that's what we did. We went ahead and we executed that search warrant, yet still we meet resistance and a lot of rhetoric for just out there doing our law enforcement mission.
And joining me now, former Border Patrol agent and senior fellow for the Texas Public Policy Foundation, Ammon Blair. Thank you so much for being with us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so given your extensive experience as a U.S. Border Patrol agent in the Rio Grande Valley sector, what are the most critical, I guess, often overlooked aspects of border security that, as we sit here and discuss this today, that you believe warrant greater public attention?
Yeah, if you look at the video that you just displayed, unfortunately, it looks like a third world country. It looks like we're doing an extraction either in Mexico or in the Middle East. I also served a little over 20 years in the military. And in the Middle East, what's interesting is our partner nations also have to wear face masks because they're countering the foreign terrorist organizations within their own communities. And so here we are now on our streets that now look like third world countries. Our Border Patrol agents and ICE are getting assaulted, over 700% increase. And unfortunately, there are no prosecutions. And when there are no prosecutions from all the rocks being thrown and all the assaults, if there's not one prosecution against any of those, it's just going to continue. Also, the rhetoric from our own elected officials calling ICE and Border Patrol terrorists and calling them fascists and Nazis. Unfortunately, the majority of the people really aren't watching either Fox News or maybe your program. We only have a limited, I guess, customer base. And so where's everyone else getting their information? Well, if it's not from y'all, if it's not from other organizations, it could be from the left or it could be from social media. Because right now you guys are day trading attention. And the eyeballs of everyone else, they may be influenced by hearing rhetoric such as that, where that ICE are Nazis, that they're taking families, like what Gavin Newsom is saying. And so when that happens and there are no repercussions, unfortunately, we're just going to continue to see the assaults on agents and ICE increase.
Very upsetting. These are, hardworking Americans sacrificing, putting on the line every single day with families. It's unacceptable. So let's take a look back. President Trump's first term and now several months into his second. What specific policy shifts have you observed that have had the most, significant impact on border security operations?
Yeah, this is the first time ever in history since U.S. NORTHCOM was created that they're actually doing their job. You have Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who has given the order to operationally control and seal the southern border. So what they've done is they created that military zone from the Department of Labor. They took that over from California to El Paso. Unfortunately, for those of us in Texas, look, Texas is about 95% private property. Therefore, they cannot go in there and seize unless they have eminent domain, the border, which we have 1,254 miles of border. So for Pete Hegseth and U.S. NORTHCOM, it is going to be a lot more difficult to secure the border here in Texas. That's why it's so important that they work with already the Texas Army and Air National Guard, the Texas DPS, game wardens, and then also your sheriffs. It's much more vital to work with the state in that aspect, in the communities in Texas, because that's how the cartels control our side of the border. The cartels also realize this, and that's why the plazas along our border here in Texas are becoming hot and heavy. You have Cartel Jalisco New Generation now vying for key areas along our border. You have you have the Sinaloa Federation. Now that it's being split up in two factions, you have one of those factions that have actually sided with Cartel Jalisco New Generation. You're seeing massive amounts of wars going on south of West Texas, and that is because of oil. Look, President Trump has 100% gone in and going after fentanyl and then the amount of illegal aliens crossing. Well, the cartels have decided to change their commodity. They're either going through oil, the crystal meth, cocaine, and they're going by other means necessary, whether that's going to be drones in Texas, or that's going to be through the Gulf of America. But really, that's the biggest shift. The biggest shift is that U.S. NORTHCOM has completely or finally done their job since they've been created since 2002.
Considering your background in intelligence, how has the administration's approach to intelligence gathering and the analysis at the border evolved, in your opinion? And what impact has this had on confronting illicit activities?
Yeah, in the very first, designated the Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Listening to those of us who have been preaching this for years now. Look, the cartels have been on parallel to the Mexican military since around 2015. They can completely wipe out the Mexican military if they choose to do so. However, they don't. They work in a symbiotic relationship, both at the federal, state, and subnational level. The cartels control every socioeconomic means and aspects of their society. to include agriculture. And so by the shift in acknowledging that fact, that's the first step. However, if you look at it, we've only indicted one case. There's only been one case where we've actually gone after organized or Mexican cartels inside the United States and gone after them as terrorist organizations. Everything else has kind of been somewhat sidelined, unfortunately. It looks like we may be placing trade or the USMCA trade deal above security. We're only measuring certain metrics to determine whether we're successful or not. And like I said, that's fentanyl seizures, and then also illegal aliens crossing the border. And so I think we need to start looking at the situation south of us, not as a 90s era Colombia, where we were going after Pablo Escobar. We need to look at it as a rich Afghanistan next door. That's how they're rooted. The cartels are, like I said, a symbiotic relationship with Mexico. And by treating them as an ally, by someone that we can actually trust to make the correct decisions, unfortunately, we're going to have the same drastic mistakes that we did with Afghanistan.
What indicators are most crucial for accurately assessing the success, of border security initiatives?
Sure, that the hard part is the cartels, as you've seen at that marijuana grow operation that we saw in California. The cartels have shifted a lot of their operations to the interior of the United States. I would suggest everyone go and read the book by John Norris called Hidden War. He was a California game warden, and he talks about how he's been battling cartels forever, how they shifted a lot of their operations internally, whether that's marijuana grow operations like we saw in California, and then also working with the CCP and their proxies. Look, the Chinese triad have almost completely taken over the illegal grow operations throughout the United States. They are also in a symbiotic relationship with Mexico. So the only real metrics that we can now go off of, it can't be just at the border. It now needs to be at the interior of the United States. It needs to be the number of illegal aliens arrested or criminal illegal aliens. It needs to be the number of organizations that we also go after. Each operation needs to be transparent about who we're actually going after, which cartel they're actually associated with. Are they associated with the CCP? Which CCP organization are they with? We need to start going also after their financial assets. Every single aspect. We are dealing with foreign terrorist organizations. This is internal defense inside the United States. We need to have the exact same metrics that the Department of Defense uses overseas to determine whether they're successful in a country that we do here in the United States.
Could you discuss the role of, technology and infrastructure such as the border wall in the current border security framework as it relates to the Trump administration?
Sure. Unfortunately, we have kind of outdated technology at our border. A lot of times Border Patrol agents, if you see videos now, you can see them now where they're having to track illegal aliens that are dressed in camouflage. They're wearing backpacks. That's because we have Vietnam era sensors in the ground still to this day. We have, and so as an agent, you're tasked to go out there and cut. We call it cut sign. You've been hunting, correct, right?
A lot.
Okay, so when you go and hunt, you track animals by their sign, correct?
Yes.
So the same thing is actually being done on the border because we don't have the technology that currently exists now. We're having to track them and guess. And so that's why they're wearing carpet on their shoes. That's why they're doing all this other stuff. And that is just because of the outdated technology that we have. So unfortunately in Texas, Governor Abbott decided to stop funding the Texas border wall, but not realizing that it takes about 1.5 years to get all those contracts back, to then look at what current technology needs to go into place, what ground like sensors need to replace their Vietnam era sensors, fiber optic systems that are utilized in Department of Defense, whether that's also counter drone. Just recently, I don't know if you've been watching on Mexican cartel activity on X, but it was released last week that they're now utilizing drones, just like they're using in Ukraine, the Ukraine and Russia war, where it's by fiber optic systems. Therefore, all of our electronic warfare to counter drones, whether at the border or interior, is ineffective against this because it's done by fiber optic systems as opposed to electronic, and so in radar situations. And so, unfortunately, we seem to always be one step behind in terms of acquisition of current technology and procurement processes. And so what we suggest at Texas Public Policy Foundation is to create something that the Special Operations Command created, a 501c3, a public-private partnership like SoftWorks or AFWorks, where they're able to bring in the current technology, the current companies that are leading the way in terms of technology, and in helping them or having them solve the problems at the speed of a startup as opposed to months or years. And so they have those programs in Special Operations Command and in the Air Force. However, DHS really lacks in terms of their acquisition and procurement. So like I said, we're going to spend billions of dollars, and then at the end of the day, you're going to have Border Patrol agents cutting sign like they're tracking animals.
Well, that's the thing. It's so funny because I've done that, when you're trying to find and go through the woods or go through wherever, or the mountains or the canyons, and you follow the tracks and you try to figure it out. That's so interesting. You tell me that they put carpet and stuff on the bottom so you can't track. Interesting. You always got to stay 10 steps ahead, as they're thinking
always,
every day how to get away with it.
Because of how it's how we've kind of thought of the cartels. We've only thought of them as criminal elements and not as foreign terrorist organizations. Look, they're in 65 different countries. They're very intelligent. And so, but we sit there and we think that they're just your everyday mafia or your everyday smuggler. And that's not the case. The people that we're going after, they may be that. They may be that 14 or 15-year-old kid that is guiding the narcotics across. However, the people that are actually leading it, very sophisticated, very intelligent. They do one of the greatest counterintelligence programs in the world. They have military-grade telecommunication systems, just you name it. And so, but we continue to see them as such a lesser threat. Kind of like remember when Obama came out and said that ISIS was their B team?
Yeah, like JV, please.
Yeah, the JV. That's exactly what we're doing at the cartels, and we continue to do. We act as if they are JV, not realizing that ever since the early 90s, they have created a pipeline into every single one of our communities. And so actually their greatest commodity is access to you and me. And that is why the CCP, Hezbollah, Hamas, every state and non-state actor has to build a relationship with the cartels because they've built that pipeline.
Yeah,
Yet
right.
we still continue to
They
see
have that
them.
infrastructure, so we shouldn't dismiss it. Like, take it seriously and do something intelligent to combat it.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. All right, I have another question for you. You're doing very well, by the way. How has, in your opinion, the coordination between federal law enforcement, state initiatives like Operation Lone Star, military support evolved under the current administration under Trump, and what are the strengths of this collaboration?
I mean, you can see it in certain cases. You had that case where we've got the top leader of MS-13 in Virginia a few months back. And that was state-led. It was using the task force model by Tom Homan. But I'm going to be honest. Look, we're dealing with a rotten federal system. You have a lot of federal agents and officers that don't want to do their job. They haven't had to. For a long time, they were facilitating the invasion. They were clocking in and clocking out and just taking a paycheck. And so you're dealing with certain rot. And that's why Tom Homan and President Trump really need to start focusing on red areas. Not only that, but focusing on areas that they can actually have some influence on the local law enforcement. That's going to be their bread and butter from here on out, is your local PD, your county sheriffs, and your state police. Unfortunately, here in Texas, we had our state DPS, the deputy director, testify at our last legislative cycle against Tom Homan's plan. And so they testified against the 287G program. So moving forward, the rhetoric needs to be stop calling out these the sanctuary cities, because unfortunately many red states and many red areas are sanctuary as well, and not because of policy or anything else, it's by omission. And so when you have local counties not doing their job or their due diligence in countering or assisting in the mass deportation efforts, if they're not going out and working proactive law enforcement as opposed to reactive, then you're going to have sanctuaries across the United States, and that's what we're seeing. So when they're having problems getting that 3,000 moniker a day, of hitting that number every single day, they're going to continue to not get that number until they start focusing on red states and focusing on that messaging and that task force model, and working with it. Really, the only state right now, the only state that is actually leading the nation is Florida. Florida's operational plan.
Very interesting.
Florida's operational plan is the only plan right now where they have made it that way they don't have to rely on the federal program. They have not only what you're seeing, you see the alligator Alcatraz, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg. They have an entire immigration division that's codified in law, which is led by someone that kind of like our version of what Mike Banks was. That he's now the chief of the Border Patrol, but in Texas. But they have their own division now. So all federal efforts are now completely organized, funded. They have a funding mechanism of $350 million from the state. They have a transportation program run by their emergency management and National and State Guard. They have everything done. And in fact, because ICE wasn't working fast enough, he realized that a lot of ICE agents and HSI and all these people, there's so much rot that 100 of his state troopers were deputized as U.S. Marshals. Now they don't even have to wait for ICE. They don't have to wait for federal assistance. They're now deputized as U.S. Marshals. And so they're actually able to do that. They have completely made a parallel immigration and internal defense mechanism, and also their state guard. What he did with their state guard is revolutionary, in that he made it so that way he's in control of it as opposed to the federal military department. Just like what Special Operations Command is to President Trump. Then he created a unit all from former Special Forces, from Navy SEALs, MARSOC, Rangers. And he did that. At first, he did that, and he built it. It's called the Special Missions Unit. And then he also deputized him in every county with the sheriffs. So now he's not only he not only has a unit that is specifically trained for high-level search and rescue, but he also has one that can actually counter the Cuban TCOs, the cartels within Florida, you name it. And it can be that force multiplier for sheriffs that don't have that training, that don't have that experience countering foreign terrorist organizations worldwide. And so Florida is leading not only in the immigration front, but also in their internal defense.
All right. Well done. I got to tell you, this has been a very interesting show. I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation we've had together. Would love to have you back again. And anything you want to promote in terms of where people can follow you, find you, etc.
Yes, ma'am. If everyone can follow us at texaspolicy.com, at the Secure and Sovereign Texas Initiative. What Florida is doing, we also advocate in our area. We want to make Texas the freest state in the nation and also the most secure and sovereign. So that's where you can reach us at, is texaspolicy.com.
All right, fantastic. Mr. Blair, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, be well. And remember, border security is national security. At the core of the MAGA mission is protecting American safety, security, and sovereignty. America isn't just an idea. Is a place, a country, and a home. And it's why now more than ever it is critical to understanding that there is virtue in protecting borders and that it makes the world stronger, not weaker. I want to thank you so much for joining us today and each and every time you watch this program. Please be sure to download the Rumble app, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, like and share, and tell all your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And please also be sure to follow me across all platforms: X, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Stay tuned to Rumble for all the latest breaking news coverage. And don't miss Don Jr.'s big show at 6 p.m. Eastern. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again very soon. God bless.